The flames were already licking at her feet when the sky turned black. Elena could feel the heat burning through her torn dress as the crowd screamed for her death. "Witch!" they chanted. "Burn the witch!" The rope cut deep into her wrists as she struggled against the wooden post. Her emerald eyes searched the sea of hateful faces, people who once called her friend, who once sought her healing touch when their children were sick. Now they wanted her dead. The fire crackled louder. The smoke stung her lungs. She closed her eyes and whispered a prayer to whatever gods might listen. But instead of the roar of flames consuming her, she heard something else, something that made the entire crowd fall silent in terror. The beating of massive wings. When she opened her eyes, the sun had vanished behind a creature so enormous it blocked out the sky. Scales black as midnight, eyes like molten gold, claws that could crush a castle wall. The dragon descended like death itself, and in that moment, everything Elena thought she knew about her life, about magic, about destiny, about love, was about to change forever. But how did a simple healer's daughter end up tied to a stake, condemned to die? And why would a dragon, the most feared creature in all the realm, risk everything to save her? This is her story, a story of forbidden magic, impossible love, and a truth so dangerous that kingdoms would fall to keep it buried.
3 months before the flames, Elena's hands glowed with a soft, silver light. She knelt beside little Thomas, the baker's son, whose fever had raged for 3 days. His mother sobbed quietly in the corner of their tiny cottage, certain she was about to lose her only child. But Elena pressed her palms against the boy's burning forehead and whispered words in the old language, words her grandmother had taught her in secret. The light flowed from her fingers like liquid starlight. Thomas's breathing eased. His fever broke. Color returned to his pale cheeks. "It's a miracle," his mother gasped, falling to her knees. Elena helped the boy sit up, her own strength drained from the healing. "It's just medicine," she lied, as she always did. "Herbs and knowledge passed down from my grandmother." But deep in her heart, she knew the truth. What flowed through her was older than herbs, older than medicine. It was magic, pure, ancient magic that had been forbidden in the kingdom of Valdris for over a century. Elena lived on the outskirts of Millbrook, a small village nestled between rolling hills and dark forests. Her cottage sat beside a crystal-clear stream, surrounded by gardens where she grew healing herbs. To the villagers, she was simply Elena the Healer, a kind young woman with an unusual gift for curing sickness and mending bones. They didn't know about the silver light. They didn't know about the voices that whispered to her in her dreams, teaching her secrets of power that had been lost for generations. And they certainly didn't know that Lord Marcus, the king's own brother, had been hunting for someone exactly like her for years. Elena's grandmother had warned her before she died. "Hide your true nature, child," the old woman had whispered with her final breath. "The world isn't ready for what you are. They fear magic because they don't understand it, and what they fear, they destroy." But Elena's heart was too pure, her compassion too strong. She couldn't watch people suffer when she had the power to heal them. So she took risks. She saved lives, and with each miracle, she painted a target on her back.
The morning after she healed Thomas, Elena found a stranger watching her cottage from the edge of the forest. He was tall and cloaked in black, his face hidden in shadow. When their eyes met across the distance, she felt a chill run down her spine. Not fear, exactly. Something else. Something that made her heart race and her magic stir restlessly beneath her skin. The stranger raised one hand in what might have been a greeting or a warning, then disappeared into the trees like smoke. That night, Elena dreamed of dragons and fire, of a voice calling her name from far above the clouds. She woke with tears on her cheeks and a strange mark on her shoulder, a mark that looked exactly like a dragon's claw. What was happening to her? And who was the mysterious stranger who seemed to know exactly what she was? Lord Marcus arrived in Millbrook with 20 armed soldiers and a heart full of hatred. He was a man who had dedicated his life to purging magic from the realm. Tall and cruel, with sharp features and eyes like winter ice, Marcus believed that magic was a disease that needed to be cut out of the world like a tumor. His own sister had been born with the gift, and he had watched it drive her to madness before she took her own life. Never again, he had sworn. Never again would magic destroy someone he loved. For 15 years, he had hunted down every witch, every sorcerer, every person who dared to practice the forbidden arts. He had burned dozens at the stake, and each death had hardened his heart a little more. Now, reports of miraculous healings had reached his ears. A young woman in a remote village who could cure any illness, mend any wound. People called it a gift from the gods, but Marcus knew better. He knew magic when he heard it. Elena sensed the danger the moment the soldiers rode into Millbrook. She watched from her cottage window as they questioned the villagers, as they searched homes and threatened families. Her magic writhed inside her like a caged animal, begging to be released. She could scatter those soldiers like leaves in a storm wind, but that would only prove what Marcus suspected. Instead, she tried to run. That night, she packed a small bag and slipped out through her back door. But she had barely reached the forest edge when torches surrounded her. Marcus stepped out of the shadows, his cruel smile gleaming in the firelight. "Elena of Millbrook," he said formally, "you are accused of practicing witchcraft, of consorting with demons, and of corrupting the natural order with your unholy powers." "I'm just a healer. I use herbs and—"
"Silence!" Marcus struck her across the face with his gauntleted hand. Blood trickled from her split lip. "I know what you are, witch. I've seen the reports. Miraculous healings, impossible recoveries, children brought back from death's door by your medicine." The soldiers bound her hands with iron chains, cold iron that burned against her skin and made her magic recoil in pain. They dragged her back to the village square, where a wooden stake had already been erected. Word spread quickly, and by dawn, half the village had gathered to watch. Elena searched the crowd desperately for a friendly face, for someone who might speak in her defense. She found only fear and accusation. Even Thomas's mother, whose son she had saved just days before, stood silent as Marcus read the charges against her. "The penalty for witchcraft is death by fire. Let this be a warning to any who would traffic with dark powers. Magic is a poison that corrupts everything it touches." They tied Elena to the stake as the sun climbed higher in the sky. The rough wooden post pressed against her back. The ropes cut into her wrists and ankles. She tried to call upon her magic, but the iron chains made it impossible. All she could do was watch as Marcus himself lit the kindling at her feet. "Any last words, witch?" he asked. Elena lifted her chin defiantly. "You're making a mistake. The magic I carry isn't evil. It's meant to heal, to protect, to—" "Lies," Marcus spat. "All magic is corruption. All magic leads to darkness. The flames began to spread up toward her feet. The heat grew intense. The smoke made her cough and gasp. The crowd pressed closer, their faces twisted with bloodlust and fear. This was it, Elena thought. This was how her story would end. Not with love or triumph, or even a peaceful death in old age, but burning alive, condemned by the very people she had tried to help. She closed her eyes and tried to think of something beautiful. Her grandmother's garden in springtime, the silver light that flowed from her hands when she healed, the mysterious stranger who had watched her from the forest. But then the crowd fell silent. When Elena opened her eyes, the world had changed. The sky above had turned black as midnight, blocked out by something vast and impossible. The beating of enormous wings created a wind that scattered the flames around her feet. A dragon, a real dragon, larger than the village church, with scales that gleamed like polished obsidian and eyes that burned like molten gold. It descended toward the square, and for the first time in her life, she felt something she had never experienced before. She felt like she was coming home.
The dragon landed with an impact that shook the earth and sent the crowd scattering in terror. Up close, it was even more magnificent than Elena had imagined. Each scale was the size of a shield, rippling with an inner light that seemed to pulse with its heartbeat. Its claws dug deep furrows in the stone of the village square. When it opened its massive jaws, she could see rows of teeth like crystal daggers and feel the heat of its breath. But it wasn't the dragon's size or power that made Elena gasp in wonder. It was its eyes. Those molten gold eyes looked at her with such intelligence, such recognition, that her heart nearly stopped. This wasn't some mindless beast. This was someone she knew. The dragon's great head turned toward Lord Marcus, who had drawn his sword despite the obvious futility of the gesture. When it spoke, its voice was like distant thunder, deep and ancient and filled with barely contained fury. "Release her!" Marcus stumbled backward, his face pale with shock. Dragons were supposed to be extinct. They were legends, stories told to frighten children. They certainly weren't supposed to speak with the cultured accent of nobility. Release her! The dragon roared, and every window in the village square exploded outward in a shower of glass. Several soldiers fainted outright. Others threw down their weapons and ran. Elena felt the ropes around her wrists snap, not burned through by flame, but dissolved by magic. She stepped away from the stake, her legs shaky but her power flooding back through her now that the iron chains were gone. The silver light played around her fingers like living things. "Come," the dragon said, lowering its great head toward her. "We must go." "Wait," Elena said, even as her heart hammered with excitement and terror. "I don't understand. Who are you? Why are you helping me?" The dragon's eyes softened, and for just a moment, Elena saw something heartbreakingly human in that ancient gaze. "Because," it said quietly, "I know what it's like to be hunted for what you are instead of who you are." Lord Marcus finally found his courage, or perhaps his hatred overcame his fear. "Don't let the witch escape! Kill them both!" Arrows flew toward Elena and the dragon. Without thinking, Elena raised her hands and spoke a word of power she didn't even know she knew. A barrier of silver light sprang up around them, and the arrows burst into harmless sparks the moment they touched it. The dragon looked at her with something like pride. "Impressive," it rumbled, "but we can discuss your growing power later. Right now, We need to leave." It extended one enormous wing toward her, creating a ramp she could climb. Elena hesitated for just a moment, looking back at the village that had been her home, at the people who had just tried to burn her alive. Then she placed her foot on the dragon's wing and climbed up onto its back. The scales were warm beneath her touch, and she could feel the creature's great heart beating like a drum. Between its shoulder blades was a natural saddle where she could sit securely, as if she had been meant to ride there. "Hold tight," the dragon warned. They launched into the sky with a power that took Elena's breath away. The village fell away beneath them, growing smaller and smaller until it was just a tiny cluster of buildings beside a silver stream. The wind whipped through her hair, and for the first time in months, she felt truly free. "Where are we going?" she called over the rushing wind. "To the place where you can learn the truth about what you really are, about what we both are, about the destiny that was written in the stars before either of us was born." They flew over dark forests and rolling hills, over rivers that sparkled like ribbons of light, and mountains that reached toward the clouds. Elena had never seen the world from such a height, never imagined how beautiful and vast it was beyond the borders of her small village. But as they flew, questions tumbled through her mind. Why had this dragon saved her? How did it know about her magic? And why did she feel such a deep, inexplicable connection to this creature she had never seen before? Most importantly, why did the dragon's voice sound almost familiar, as if it belonged to someone she had been waiting her whole life to meet?
The dragon's lair was not what Elena had expected. Instead of a dark cave filled with gold and bones, she found herself in a hidden valley surrounded by towering peaks. Crystal-clear waterfalls cascaded down the mountainsides, feeding a lake so blue it looked like a piece of fallen sky. Ancient trees grew along the shores, their leaves shimmering with an otherworldly light. But most surprising of all was the castle. It rose from an island in the center of the lake, connected to the shore by a bridge of white stone. The architecture was unlike anything Elena had ever seen. Graceful spires that seemed to dance in the wind, walls that glowed with inner light, towers that reached toward the heavens like prayers made of marble and crystal. "Welcome to Drakmor," the dragon said, as they landed in a courtyard filled with gardens that bloomed in impossible colors. "The last free kingdom of magic." Elena slid down from the dragon's back, her legs unsteady after the long flight. "I don't understand," she said. "I thought magic was forbidden everywhere. I thought all the magical kingdoms fell over a century ago." "Most did," the dragon replied, its great head drooping with sadness. "But a few survived, hidden away from the world, protected by barriers that keep them invisible to those who would destroy them." As Elena looked around the courtyard, she began to notice movement in the shadows. Figures emerged from doorways and passages. Men and women in flowing robes, their eyes glowing with inner light. Some carried staffs topped with crystals. Others had flowers blooming in their hair, or small flames dancing in their palms. Mages! Real mages! Like the ones from her grandmother's stories. "This is impossible," Elena whispered. "Nothing is impossible when you have the blood of dragons in your veins," said a warm voice behind her. Elena turned to see a woman approaching from the castle. She was tall and elegant, with silver hair that moved like liquid mercury, and eyes the color of deep forest pools. Her robe seemed to be woven from starlight itself. "Elena," the woman said with a gentle smile, "I am Lady Seraphina, keeper of Drakmore's ancient knowledge. We have been waiting for you for a very long time."
Waiting for me? Elena's head spun with confusion. But how could you know I was coming? I didn't even know this place existed until Darian brought you here, Lady Seraphina finished. Yes, we know. We've been watching you since you were born, child, protecting you from a distance, waiting for the day when your power would grow strong enough that you could no longer hide what you are. Elena looked back at the dragon, who was studying her with those intelligent golden eyes. "Darian?" she said softly. "That's your name?" The dragon's expression shifted, becoming almost shy. "It is," he rumbled, "though I haven't been called by that name in many years." "Darian," Elena repeated, tasting the name on her tongue. It felt familiar somehow, like a half-remembered melody from a dream. "But you're a dragon. How can you have a human name?" Lady Seraphina and the dragon, Darian, exchanged a meaningful look. "Perhaps," Lady Seraphina said carefully, "it would be better if you saw for yourself." The air around Darian began to shimmer like heat waves rising from summer stone. The massive form of the dragon wavered, becoming translucent, then began to shrink and shift. Elena watched in wonder as scales became skin, claws became fingers, wings folded inward and disappeared. When the transformation was complete, a man stood before her. He was tall and powerfully built, with black hair that fell to his shoulders and the same molten gold eyes that had looked at her with such intelligence when he was in dragon form. His skin was bronzed as if by sunlight, and when he moved, there was still something of the dragon's grace in his movements. He was, Elena realized, with a flush that warmed her cheeks, the most handsome man she had ever seen. But more than that, he was the stranger who had watched her from the forest edge, the one who had raised his hand in greeting before disappearing into the trees. "You," she whispered, "you were watching me." Darian nodded, suddenly seeming almost vulnerable despite his impressive size. "I was," he admitted. "For months I watched over you from a distance. I wanted to approach you sooner, but revealing himself would have put you both in danger," Lady Seraphina finished. "You see, Elena, Darian isn't just any dragon shifter. He is the lost prince of Valdris, the rightful heir to the throne that his uncle now claims." Elena's world tilted sideways. "Uncle?" she gasped. "You mean Lord Marcus is your—"
"My father's brother," Darian said bitterly. "The man who usurped the throne when my parents died. The man who has spent 15 years hunting down and murdering everyone with magical blood in the kingdom, including his own nephew, if he ever discovers I'm still alive." The pieces of the puzzle began falling into place in Elena's mind. A dragon prince, presumed dead. A usurper on the throne who hated magic. And herself, a healer with powers that grew stronger every day. "Why?" she asked. "Why did you save me? Why risk exposing yourself?" Darian stepped closer, and Elena felt her magic respond to his presence, silver light dancing around her fingers. "Because," he said softly, "you are the key to everything.
The prophecy spoke of a healer with the light of stars in her hands, a woman who would help restore the balance between magic and the mundane world. He reached out tentatively, as if asking permission, and when Elena didn't pull away, he gently touched her face. "And because," he said even more quietly, "from the moment I first saw you, I knew you were the other half of my soul." Elena's breath caught in her throat. The connection she had felt, the sense of coming home when she saw the dragon, it hadn't been her imagination. "The dragon bond," Lady Seraphina explained gently. "It happens only once in a generation, when a dragon shifter finds their true mate. The two souls recognize each other across any distance, in any form." Elena looked into Darian's golden eyes and saw her own wonder reflected there. "Is it real, this feeling?" "As real as magic, as real as the love that will either save our kingdom or destroy us both." But even as Elena felt her heart opening to this impossible man, a new fear crept in. If Darian was the lost prince and she was bound to him by dragon magic, then they weren't just fugitives anymore. They were the greatest threat Lord Marcus had ever faced, and he would stop at nothing to destroy them both. That night, in the crystal hall deep within Drakmoor's castle, Elena learned the truth about her destiny. Lady Seraphina led them down spiraling stairs that seemed to be carved from a single massive gemstone. The walls glowed with their own inner light, casting rainbow patterns that danced and shifted as they walked. At the bottom of the stairs lay a circular chamber where the very air hummed with ancient power.
In the center of the room stood a pool of water so still it looked like polished obsidian. Above it, suspended in the air by magic, hung a crystal orb the size of a human head. As they approached, the orb began to glow, and images formed within its depths. "The Seeing Stone," Lady Seraphina explained. "It has recorded every prophecy spoken in the magical realm for over 1,000 years, including the one that speaks of you both." Elena felt Darian's hand slip into hers, his warm fingers intertwining with her own. His touch sent little sparks of silver light dancing across their joined palms, and she marveled at how natural it felt to be beside him. The images in the crystal began to move and shift, showing scenes of the past and possible futures. Elena saw great battles between armies of men and creatures of magic. She saw cities burning and forests withering. She saw a kingdom torn apart by hatred and fear. Then the crystal's glow intensified, and a voice spoke from its depths, ancient, ethereal, neither male nor female, but somehow both. "When darkness claims the throne of men, and magic flees to hidden glen, two souls shall rise from separate birth, to heal the wounds that scar the earth." Elena shivered as the prophecy continued, the words seeming to resonate in her very bones. "The Prince of Dragons, lost but true, shall find his heart in morning's dew. The healer's daughter, touched by star, shall light the way both near and far. Together bound by ancient right, they'll stand against the endless night. But danger walks on silent feet, and love and power rarely meet. For those who fear what they can't hold will try to break what can't be sold. The choice must come between heart and crown, to lift the realm or burn it down." The images in the crystal shifted again, and showed Elena herself standing in a great hall, silver light pouring from her hands like liquid starlight. Beside him stood Darian in his dragon form, magnificent and terrible, his golden eyes blazing with protective fury.
But then the scene changed, and Elena gasped. She saw herself chained again, this time in a dungeon deep beneath a castle. She saw Darien falling from the sky, his dragon form pierced by dozens of spears. She saw Lord Marcus standing over them both, a crown of iron on his head and madness in his eyes.
Two paths diverge in time's great flow, the voice continued relentlessly. One leads to joy, and one to woe. The choice belongs to those who dare to face what waits in darkness there. But know this truth, both heart and mind, what's lost in love can't be left behind. The crystal's glow faded, leaving them in the gentler light of the chamber walls. Elena realized she was trembling, and Darien's arm tightened protectively around her shoulders. "So it's true," she said quietly. "We're bound together by prophecy, as well as whatever this is between us. Destiny rarely cares about our personal feelings, but in your case, the heart and the prophecy seem to align. The question is, are you both willing to pay the price that destiny demands?" Darien turned Elena to face him, his golden eyes serious. "You need to understand what you're choosing," he said. "If you stay with me, if we try to fulfill this prophecy, Lord Marcus will hunt us to the ends of the earth. He has armies, allies, resources we can barely imagine, and if he captures us, he'll kill us both," Elena finished. "I know." "You could leave," Darien continued, though the words seemed to cause him physical pain. "Lady Seraphina could take you somewhere safe, somewhere far from the kingdom. You could live a quiet life, use your healing powers to help people, never have to worry about prophecies or dragon bonds or—" Elena silenced him by placing her fingers gently over his lips. "And leave you to face this alone? Leave the kingdom to suffer under Marcus's hatred of magic? Pretend I don't feel my soul calling out to yours every time you look at me?" She stepped closer until there was barely an inch between them. "I've spent my whole life hiding what I am, being afraid of my own power. I won't spend the rest of it running from who I'm meant to be." "Elena," Darien whispered, and she could hear all his hopes and fears in that single word. "Besides," she said with a smile that held more courage than she felt, "the prophecy said we have two paths to choose from. Maybe we'll be the ones who find the path that leads to joy instead of woe." Lady Seraphina cleared her throat gently. "If you're truly committed to this course, then we need to begin your training immediately. Elena, your power is still largely untapped. And Darien, you've been hiding your true nature for so long that you've forgotten some of what you're capable of." "Training?" Elena asked. "You think you can face the armies of Valdris with just raw magic and good intentions?" Lady Seraphina smiled. "Child, you have the potential to be the most powerful healer mage born in centuries, but potential means nothing without knowledge and discipline." She gestured toward the pool in the center of the chamber. "Step into the moonwell, both of you. Let its waters show you what you truly are." Elena looked at Darien, who nodded encouragingly. Together, they stepped down into the pool. The water was warm against their skin and seemed to glow wherever they touched it. As they waded deeper, Elena felt her magic responding, silver light spiraling up from the water around them. "Now," Lady Seraphina said, "let me show you the power that flows in your veins, the power that will either save the kingdom or destroy it." Elena closed her eyes and let the magic rise. When she opened them again, the entire chamber blazed with silver fire, and she could feel Darian's dragon essence calling to hers like a song of wind and flame. For the first time, she truly understood what they were meant to become, and what they would have to face to get there. 3 weeks of training in Drakemore changed Elena in ways she never could have imagined. Under Lady Seraphina's guidance, she learned to control the silver fire that flowed through her veins. She could heal wounds with a touch, purify poison with a breath, and create barriers of light strong enough to stop a charging warhorse. But more than that, she learned the deeper mysteries of her magic. How to sense the life force in all living things, how to communicate with plants and animals, how to read the patterns of power that flowed through the world like invisible rivers. "You're not just a healer," Lady Seraphina explained one afternoon, as Elena made an entire garden bloom with a gesture. "You're a life mage, connected to the fundamental forces that sustain all existence. In the old days, your kind were revered as living goddesses." Darian's training was different, but equally intense. He learned to shift between his human and dragon forms at will, to use his fire breath with precision instead of raw destruction, to fly with the grace and speed his royal bloodline demanded. But he also studied statecraft, military strategy, and the ancient laws that would govern him if he ever reclaimed his throne. In the evenings, when their formal training was done, Elena and Darian would walk together through Drakemore's enchanted gardens. They talked for hours about their childhoods, their dreams, their fears about the future. Elena learned that Darian had been only 12 when his parents died, that he had spent the last 15 years believing he was the only one of his kind left alive. Darian discovered that Elena had always felt different, always known there was something more to her than what appeared on the surface.
Arrows flew toward Elena and the dragon. Without thinking, Elena raised her hands and spoke a word of power she didn't even know she knew. A barrier of silver light sprang up around them, and the arrows burst into harmless sparks the moment they touched it. The dragon looked at her with something like pride. "Impressive," it rumbled, "but we can discuss your growing power later. Right now, we need to leave." It extended one enormous wing toward her, creating a ramp she could climb. Elena hesitated for just a moment, looking back at the village that had been her home, at the people who had just tried to burn her alive. Then she placed her foot on the dragon's wing and climbed up onto its back. The scales were warm beneath her touch, and she could feel the creature's great heart beating like a drum. Between its shoulder blades was a natural saddle where she could sit securely, as if she had been meant to ride there. "Hold tight," the dragon warned. They launched into the sky with a power that took Elena's breath away. The village fell away beneath them, growing smaller and smaller until it was just a tiny cluster of buildings beside a silver stream. The wind whipped through her hair, and for the first time in months, she felt truly free. "Where are we going?" she called over the rushing wind. "To the place where you can learn the truth about what you really are, about what we both are, about the destiny that was written in the stars before either of us was born." They flew over dark forests and rolling hills, over rivers that sparkled like ribbons of light, and mountains that reached toward the clouds. Elena had never seen the world from such a height, never imagined how beautiful and vast it was beyond the borders of her small village. But as they flew, questions tumbled through her mind.
Why had this dragon saved her? How did it know about her magic? And why did she feel such a deep, inexplicable connection to this creature she had never seen before? Most importantly, why did the dragon's voice sound almost familiar, as if it belonged to someone she had been waiting her whole life to meet?
That night, Elena couldn't sleep. She stood on the balcony outside her chamber, looking up at the stars and trying to quiet the fears that churned in her stomach. The weight of destiny pressed down on her shoulders like a physical burden. All those people looking to her and Darian for salvation. What if they weren't strong enough? What if they failed? Having second thoughts, Darian's warm voice came from behind her. Elena turned to find him approaching in his human form, moonlight silvering his dark hair. Even now, after weeks of being near him constantly, her heart still raced when she looked at him. "Third and fourth thoughts," she admitted. "Darian, what if we're wrong? What if trying to fulfill this prophecy just makes things worse?" He moved to stand beside her at the balcony rail, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his skin. "Do you remember what you told me the night we met? About not being able to watch people suffer when you had the power to help them?" Elena nodded. "That's who you are, Elena. That's the heart that called to mine across all the years of loneliness. You can't turn away from suffering any more than I can abandon my people to Marcus's tyranny." His hand covered hers on the stone rail. "We're stronger together than apart. Whatever comes, we'll face it side by side." Elena turned her hand palm up, intertwining her fingers with his. Silver light danced between their joined hands, warm and comforting. "Promise me something," she said. "Anything. If the time comes when you have to choose between the kingdom and me, choose the kingdom. Don't let my life be the reason thousands of others suffer." Darian's golden eyes blazed with sudden intensity. "Never," he said fiercely. "I will never sacrifice you for anything or anyone. We find another way, or we don't find a way at all." Before Elena could argue, he leaned down and kissed her. It was their first kiss, soft and tentative at first, then deeper as she responded to the warmth of his lips against hers. Magic sparked between them, silver and gold light wrapping around their bodies like living ribbons. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "Now do you understand?" Darian whispered against her forehead. "You're not just my destiny, Elena. You're my heart, my soul, the part of me that makes everything else worth fighting for."
Elena looked up into his eyes and saw her own love reflected there, fierce and uncompromising, and strong enough to challenge fate itself. "Then we'd better make sure we both survive this," she said. But even as she spoke the words, a chill wind rose from the valley below, carrying with it the scent of smoke and steel. Somewhere in the darkness, Lord Marcus was preparing for war, and their time in paradise was running out. The attack came at dawn, swift and merciless as a striking snake. Elena woke to the sound of war horns echoing off the mountain peaks. She rushed to her window and felt her heart stop at the sight below. The hidden valley was no longer hidden. Hundreds of soldiers in the black and silver of Valdris surrounded the lake, their armor glinting in the early morning light.
Siege engines rolled into position along the shores, and banners bearing Lord Marcus's iron fist snapped in the wind. "How did they find us?" Elena gasped as Darien burst into her chamber, already half transformed, scales rippling along his arms and his eyes blazing gold with rage. "Betrayal," he snarled. "Someone told them where we were." They rushed through the castle corridors, joining the stream of mages who were taking defensive positions along the walls. Lady Seraphina met them in the great hall, her face grim but determined. It was Lord Garrett, one of our own council members. He sent word to Marcus 3 days ago, revealing the location of our sanctuary in exchange for safe passage for his family. Elena felt sick. "But why?" "Fear," Lady Seraphina replied sadly. "He believed that hiding was no longer enough, that Marcus would eventually find us anyway. He thought bargaining with information would at least save the ones he loved most." Through the great windows, they could see Lord Marcus himself riding at the front of his army, his black armor making him look like death incarnate. Beside him rode a figure in white robes, a man Elena didn't recognize, but whose presence made her magic recoil in instinctive fear. "Who is that?" she asked, pointing.
Darien's expression darkened further. "High Inquisitor Aldrich," he spat. "Marcus's personal witch hunter. They say he can sense magical auras from a mile away, that he's killed more mages than any other man alive. He's also the one who convinced Marcus that all magic users are inherently evil," Lady Seraphina added. "He lost his wife to a dark sorcerer years ago and has been on a crusade ever since." A voice amplified by magic echoed across the valley, bouncing off the mountain walls with supernatural force. It was Lord Marcus, and his words carried the weight of absolute authority. "People of Drakmor, you harbor enemies of the crown, the traitor prince and his witch consort. Surrender them now, and the rest of you will be allowed to live in exile. Refuse, and every soul in that castle will burn." Lady Seraphina stepped onto the main balcony, her own voice enhanced by magic as she replied, "Marcus the usurper, you have no authority here. This is sovereign magical territory, protected by treaties signed by your own brother." "My brother is dead," Marcus roared back, "as is his line. I am the rightful king of Valdris, and I will not suffer witches to corrupt my realm." Darien joined Lady Seraphina on the balcony, and Elena gasped as he began to shift into his dragon form. His human shape stretched and expanded, scales erupting across his skin like liquid obsidian. Wings unfurled from his back with a sound like thunder, and his neck elongated as his face transformed into the magnificent, terrible visage of a true dragon. When his transformation was complete, he stood at his full height, 30 feet from nose to tail, his scales gleaming like black mirrors in the morning sun. His voice, when he spoke, was the rumble of mountains moving. "I am Darien, son of Egmont, rightful heir to the throne of Valdris. You murdered my parents, stole my birthright, and turned my kingdom into a realm of fear and hatred. Face me in single combat, coward, and let us settle this as warriors." Marcus's laughter echoed across the valley, cold and mocking. "Combat with a monster? You're not worthy of an honorable death, nephew. You'll burn with the rest of the abominations." He raised his hand, and the siege engines launched their first volley. Massive stones sailed through the air toward the castle, but they never reached their target. The mages of Drakmor raised their staffs as one, and barriers of shimmering energy intercepted the projectiles, turning them to harmless dust. "The outer shields will hold for a while," Lady Seraphina said to Elena and Darien, "but not forever. Not against an army that size."
"Then we need to break the siege," Elena said, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. "Take the fight to them before they can wear down our defenses." "Elena, no!" Darien protested, his great dragon head turning toward her. "It's too dangerous. If something happened to you, something will happen to all of us if we just hide behind these walls. Look at them, Darien. There are hundreds of soldiers down there, but most of them are just following orders. They're not evil, they're afraid. Maybe if they see what we really are, if they understand that we're not the monsters Marcus claims we are, some of them might change sides." "Or they might kill you the moment you show yourself," Darien rumbled. Elena stepped closer to him, placing her hand on the warm scales of his neck. Even in dragon form, she could feel his emotions through their bond. Love, fear, desperate protectiveness. "We can't win this war by hiding," she said softly. "The prophecy talked about healing the wounds that scar the earth. Maybe that means healing the wound between magical and non-magical people. Maybe it means showing them that we're not their enemies." Lady Seraphina looked thoughtful. "There is precedent for such an approach. In the old days, mages would sometimes reveal their true nature to hostile forces, demonstrating their benevolent intentions through acts of healing and protection rather than destruction." "It's madness," Darien said, but Elena could hear the consideration in his voice. "So is letting Marcus destroy everyone we care about. Darien, you've spent 15 years hiding what you are. I've spent my whole life pretending to be less than I am. Maybe it's time we both stopped hiding." Another volley of stones crashed against the magical barriers, and this time some of them got through. The castle shuddered under the impact, and cracks appeared in the ancient walls. "The shields are weakening," Lady Seraphina reported grimly. "We have perhaps an hour before they fail completely." Elena looked out at the army surrounding them, then up at Darien's dragon form towering above her. "1 hour," she murmured. "1 hour to change the course of history." She stepped back from Darien and began to glow with silver light, brighter than she had ever shone before. The light poured from her skin like liquid starlight, so intense that it was visible even in the morning sun. "If we're going to do this, we do it together. No holding back, no hiding, no fear. We show them exactly what we are, and trust that love is stronger than hatred." Darien's dragon form began to shimmer as he started to shift back to human shape. "Together," he agreed, "whatever comes." But as they prepared to face the army below, neither of them noticed the figure in white robes who had separated from Marcus's forces and was now climbing the mountain paths toward the castle's rear entrance. High Inquisitor Aldrich had not come to lay siege. He had come to end the prophecy before it could be fulfilled.
High Inquisitor Aldrich moved through Drakmoor's lower passages like a ghost of vengeance. He had spent years studying the castle's ancient blueprints, learning every secret tunnel and hidden door. While the mages focused their attention on the siege outside, he slipped through the shadows of the dungeons, his white robes seeming to glow with their own cold light. In his hand, he carried a blade unlike any other, forged from meteoric iron and blessed by 100 priests. It was said to be able to cut through any magical protection. More importantly, it was specifically designed to sever the bonds between a dragon shifter's human and beast forms, trapping them permanently in whichever shape they held when struck. Aldrich had watched Prince Darien's transformation from the valley below, and his pale eyes had gleamed with satisfaction.
The prophecy spoke of a dragon prince and a healer mage working together to restore balance to the realm. But prophecies, Aldrich knew, could be broken. All it took was removing one of the key players. Above him, he could hear the sounds of battle as the mages tried to maintain their failing shields against Marcus's assault. Perfect. They would be too distracted to notice one more magical signature moving through the castle. He found Elena exactly where he expected, in the crystal chamber where she and Darien were preparing for their desperate gambit. She stood before the seeing stone, silver light spiraling around her as she gathered her power for what would likely be the most important moment of her life. She was alone. Aldrich smiled coldly and stepped into the chamber. "Elena of Millbrook, by the authority of the Crown of Voldris, I arrest you for the crimes of witchcraft, sedition, and consorting with demons." Elena spun around, her hand instinctively rising as silver fire blazed around her fingers. But when she saw the blade in Aldrich's hand, she hesitated. There was something wrong with it, something that made her magic recoil in instinctive fear. "You're making a mistake," she said, trying to keep her voice calm. "I'm not your enemy. None of us are. We just want to live in peace." "Peace?" Aldrich laughed bitterly. "There can be no peace while creatures like you corrupt the natural order. I've seen what magic does to people, girl. I've watched it drive them mad with power, turn them into monsters who prey on the innocent." He began to advance slowly, the blessed blade held ready. "My wife was killed by someone just like you. A healer, they called her. A woman who claimed she only wanted to help people. But power corrupts, and magic is the ultimate corruption." Elena backed away, but the chamber was small and round. There was nowhere to run. "Your wife," she said desperately. "What was her name?" Aldrich paused, his face twisting with old pain. "Margaret. Her name was Margaret, and she was the purest soul I ever knew, until that witch got her claws into her mind." "What happened to her?" Elena asked, genuinely curious despite her fear. She could sense the deep pain in this man, the wound that had never healed. "She was sick," Aldrich said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "Dying. The physicians said there was nothing they could do. But then this healer came to our village. She promised she could save Margaret, but the price was her service for 1 year." Elena felt a chill run down her spine. "Service?" "The witch claimed she needed an apprentice, someone to help her gather rare herbs and ingredients. Margaret was desperate to live, to see her children grow up. So she agreed." Aldrich's grip tightened on his blade. "The witch did heal her, but then she demanded more. She wanted Margaret to learn magic, to become like her. And when Margaret tried to refuse, she forced her? She said magic chose Margaret, that it was her destiny. She filled my wife's mind with talk of power and purpose and responsibility to use her gifts. Margaret began to change. She spent more time with the witch than with her own family. She started talking about leaving, about spreading her healing to other villages." Aldrich's eyes blazed with fanatical fury. "So I did what I had to do. I gathered the other village men, and we burned them both. Margaret begged me to understand, claimed she was still the same person, but I could see the corruption in her eyes, the way the magic had twisted her soul." "You killed your own wife?" "I saved her soul," Aldrich screamed, raising the blade. "And now I'll save the kingdom from monsters like you."
He lunged forward, but Elena was ready. She threw herself to the side, rolling behind the seeing stone as the blessed blade swept through the air where she had been standing. Where it passed,
Her silver light flickered and dimmed, as if the weapon actually devoured magic. "Darian," she called out through their bond, not caring if Aldrich heard her. "I need you." But even as she sent the mental cry for help, she knew it might be too late. Aldrich was already moving around the stone, his blade gleaming with unholy purpose. "Your dragon prince can't save you now. He's too busy trying to hold off an army to notice one little mouse getting trapped in the basement." Elena pressed her back against the crystal wall, her mind racing. The chamber had only one entrance, and Aldrich stood between her and freedom. Her magic was powerful, but something about that blade made her reluctant to face it directly. If it could cut through magical protections, what would happen if it cut through her? Then she remembered something Lady Seraphina had taught her during their training. Magic wasn't just about light and healing and barriers. It was about connection to all living things, to the very forces that sustain existence. Elena closed her eyes and reached out with her power, not toward Aldrich, but toward the mountain itself. Drakmor was built on a foundation of living stone, rock that had been infused with magical energy for countless centuries. If she could tap into that. The chamber began to tremble. Dust rained down from the ceiling as Elena channeled power through the mountain's heart, calling on strength that was older than kingdoms, older than the conflicts between magic and mundane. "What are you doing?" Aldrich demanded, his confidence wavering as the walls began to glow with veins of silver light. "Something I should have done a long time ago," Elena said, opening her eyes. They blazed with such intensity that Aldrich had to look away. "I'm stopping the cycle of fear and hatred, starting with you." The silver light erupted from the walls like a flood, filling the chamber with radiance so pure and warm that it felt like being embraced by the sun itself. But this wasn't destructive magic. This was healing magic, turned to its ultimate purpose.
Elena reached out toward Aldrich's mind, not to control or dominate, but to heal. She found the wound there, the festering sore of guilt and grief that had turned him into a monster. His wife's face, twisted with pain and betrayal as the flames consumed her. His children's tears as they learned their father had murdered their mother. "No," Aldrich whispered, falling to his knees as the memories flooded through him. "Don't make me see it. Don't make me remember." "You need to remember," Elena said gently, kneeling beside him. "You need to face what you really did, not what you tell yourself you did, what you actually did." The silver light wrapped around them both, and in its glow, Aldrich saw the truth. His wife hadn't been corrupted by magic. She had been changed by it, yes, but changed for the better. The power had made her more compassionate, more aware of others' pain, more determined to help wherever she could. It was his own fear and jealousy that had twisted the situation into something sinister. His fear that she would leave him, that her new abilities made her too good for their simple village life. His jealousy of the bond she shared with her mentor, the way her eyes lit up when she talked about the wonders of magic. "She still loved you," Elena whispered. "Even when you lit the fire, she still loved you. That's why she begged you to understand instead of fighting back. She could have used her magic to escape, but she wouldn't hurt you." Aldrich sobbed, his blessed blade clattering to the stone floor. "I killed her. I killed the woman I loved because I was afraid of losing her." "Yes," Elena said simply, "you did. And you've been trying to kill that guilt ever since by destroying everyone who reminds you of her. But the guilt is still there, isn't it? It's been eating you alive for years." The chamber doors burst open, and Darian rushed in, his eyes blazing with protective fury. He took in the scene, Elena kneeling beside the sobbing Inquisitor.
the magical light still swirling around them, and his expression shifted from rage to amazement. "Elena," he said softly, "what did you do?" "Something that should have been done years ago," she replied, helping Aldrich to the feet. The man looked broken, his white robe stained with tears, but there was something different in his eyes now. The fanatical hatred was gone, replaced by a crushing weight of sorrow and regret. "I can't undo what I've done. All those people I've killed in her name. All those families destroyed because I couldn't face my own guilt."
No, you can't undo it, Elena agreed. But you can stop it from happening again. You can choose to be better than the man you've been. Through the chamber's crystal walls, they could hear the sounds of battle intensifying above. The siege was reaching its climax, and soon the final defenses would fall. "We have to go," Darian said urgently. "The shields are failing. If we're going to try your plan, it has to be now." Elena nodded, then looked back at Aldrich. "What will you do?" The broken man picked up his blade, staring at its cold surface. "I don't know," he said honestly. "I've spent so many years being the weapon of Marcus's hatred. I don't know how to be anything else." "Then learn," Elena said simply. "It's never too late to choose love over fear." She and Darian hurried toward the chamber entrance, but Aldrich's voice stopped them. "The prophecy," he called out. "I know how it really ends. Marcus has been hiding the final verses, the ones that speak of the ultimate choice you'll have to make." Elena and Darian turned back, and Aldrich's haunted eyes met theirs. "One of you will have to die," he said quietly. "That's how it ends. That's how the balance is restored. The prophecy demands the sacrifice of the purest love." Elena felt Darian's hand tighten in hers, felt his determination through their bond. They looked at each other, and in that moment, both of them made the same silent vow. If one of them had to die to save the kingdom, they would find a way to make sure it was themselves and not the other, even if it meant breaking each other's hearts to do it.
The final battle came not with the clash of swords, but with the power of truth. Elena and Darian stood together on the highest tower of Drakmor as the last magical barriers fell. Below them, Marcus's army surged across the lake, their war cries echoing off the mountains. But instead of meeting them with fire and fury, Elena began to glow. The silver light poured from her like a gentle dawn, washing over the advancing soldiers. Where it touched them, their rage faltered, their hatred wavered. For the first time in years, they saw magic not as a threat to be destroyed, but as a gift to be cherished. "People of Valdris," Elena called out, her voice carried to every corner of the valley. "Look at me. See what I really am." She let her power shine at its fullest, becoming a beacon of pure healing energy. Around her, the damaged walls of Drakmor began to repair themselves. Flowers bloomed from cracks in the stone. The very air seemed to sing with life and joy. "I am Elena of Millbrook. I have healed your children when they were sick. I have mended your bones when they were broken. I have asked nothing in return but the chance to help where I can." Darian stepped forward beside her, his dragon form magnificent in the morning light. But instead of breathing fire or roaring challenges, he began to sing, a deep, harmonious melody that spoke of ancient peace between all living things. "I am Darian, son of Edmund, your rightful prince, hidden for 15 years by my uncle's hatred.
I have never harmed an innocent soul. I seek only to protect those who cannot protect themselves." In the army below, soldiers began to lower their weapons. These weren't the monsters they had been told to fear. These were people. Powerful, yes, but people nonetheless. People who radiated love and protection instead of malice and destruction. But Lord Marcus would have none of it. "Lies!" he screamed, spurring his horse toward the castle. "Pretty illusions to deceive you! They are demons wearing human faces! Kill them all!" High Inquisitor Aldrich stepped into his path. The broken man no longer wore white robes. He had torn them away, revealing simple clothes beneath. In his hands he held his blessed blade, but now he pointed it at Marcus instead of the mages. "No more," Aldrich said quietly. "I've spent 15 years being your weapon, Marcus. I've killed hundreds of innocent people because you convinced me they were evil. But I've seen the truth now. The only evil here is the hatred in your own heart." Marcus stared at his most trusted lieutenant in shock. "Aldrich, what are you saying?" "I'm saying it's over. Look around you. Your own soldiers are laying down their arms. They can see what Elena and Darian really are. Only you refuse to admit the truth."
The truth? Marcus's voice rose to a shriek. "The truth is that magic killed my sister. The truth is that power corrupts everything it touches. The truth is that I am the only one strong enough to protect this kingdom from the plague of sorcery." "Your sister killed herself," Aldrich said bluntly. "Not because magic drove her mad, but because she couldn't bear to live in a world where her own brother saw her as a monster." The words hit Marcus like physical blows. His face went white, then red with rage. "You know nothing!" he roared. "Nothing!" He drew his sword and spurred his horse toward Aldrich. But the Inquisitor didn't try to defend himself. Instead, he threw his blessed blade to the ground and opened his arms wide. "If you want to kill someone," he said calmly, "kill me. I'm the one who helped you murder all those innocent people. I am the one whose hands are truly stained with blood." Marcus's sword swept toward Aldrich's neck and stopped as Elena's power surrounded them both. Silver light held the blade frozen in midair, and Marcus found himself unable to move. "Enough," Elena said, floating down from the tower with Darian at her side. "This ends now. All of it. The hatred, the killing, the fear. It ends here." She landed in front of Marcus, her eyes blazing with power, but her voice gentle. "I know you're afraid. I know you loved your sister, and her death broke something inside you. But destroying everyone who reminds you of her won't bring her back. It will only create more pain, more loss, more families torn apart by grief." "She was all I had left," Marcus whispered, tears streaming down his face. "After our parents died, she was the only family I had, and then the magic took her away from me. It made her strange, distant. She spent more time talking to spirits than to me." "The magic didn't take her away," Elena said softly. "Your fear of it did. She needed your support, your understanding. Instead, you made her feel like a monster for something she couldn't control." Darian stepped forward, his human form radiating quiet strength. "Uncle," he said, and the word carried 15 years of pain and longing. "I know what it's like to lose family, but I also know that hatred only breeds more hatred. If you kill us, someone else will have to kill you, and then someone else will have to kill them. Where does it end?" Marcus looked around at his army.
at the hundreds of soldiers who had laid down their weapons and were listening to every word. Many of them had tears in their eyes as they recognized the truth in what Elena and Darian were saying.
"I don't know how to stop," Marcus admitted. "I've been angry for so long, I don't remember how to be anything else." Elena stepped closer until she was within arm's reach of the man who had tried to burn her alive. "Then let us help you remember," she said. "Let us heal the wound in your heart the way I've healed so many others." She held out her hand, silver light dancing around her fingers. "It won't take away the pain completely," she warned. "Grief is part of love, and love never truly dies. But it will ease the hatred that's been eating you alive." Marcus stared at her outstretched hand for a long moment. Around them, the entire army held its breath, waiting to see which path their lord would choose. Slowly, carefully, Marcus reached out and took Elena's hand. The silver light flowed between them, and Marcus gasped as he felt his sister's presence one last time. Not the twisted, tormented spirit his guilt had imagined, but the loving, gentle soul she had always been. She forgave him, he realized. She had always forgiven him, even at the very end. "I'm sorry," he whispered, falling to his knees. "Liana, I'm so sorry." "She knows," she said gently. "She's been waiting for you to forgive yourself." The transformation that followed was unlike anything the kingdom had ever seen. With Marcus's surrender, the siege ended not in victory or defeat, but in reconciliation. Soldiers who had come to kill mages instead found themselves learning about magic for the first time. Barriers that had stood for generations began to crumble as understanding replaced fear. Darian reclaimed his throne, not through conquest, but through acclamation. The people chose him not because he was the strongest or the most ruthless, but because he represented hope for a better future. Elena became his queen, and together they established the first magical mundane council in the history of Valdris. They built schools where children with magical gifts could learn alongside those without. They created hospitals where healers like Elena could work openly, saving lives without fear of persecution. High Inquisitor Aldrich spent the rest of his life working to undo the damage he had caused. He traveled throughout the kingdom, seeking out the families of those he had killed, offering what comfort and restitution he could. It was a heavy burden, but one he carried willingly. And Marcus? Marcus abdicated his claim to the throne and withdrew to a monastery where he spent his remaining years in meditation and service to others. He never fully forgave himself for what he had done, but he found peace in the knowledge that his nephew would rule with wisdom and compassion. The prophecy was fulfilled, but not in the way anyone had expected. There was no great sacrifice, no tragic death of pure love. Instead, there was choice. The choice to heal instead of harm, to understand instead of condemn, to love instead of fear. In the end, the greatest magic isn't found in spells or potions or dragon fire. It's found in the courage to see past our fears, to reach out to those who seem different from us, and to choose love, even when love seems impossible. Elena and Darian didn't save their kingdom through power or prophecy. They saved it by proving that understanding can triumph over hatred, that healing can overcome even the deepest wounds, and that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is to open our hearts to those who have hurt us most. True strength isn't the ability to destroy our enemies, it's the wisdom to turn our enemies into friends.